So next up is the nut graph. Now the nut graph is a transitional paragraph that follows the soft lead. Okay, so nut graph. The transition paragraph that follows the soft lead, which we looked at earlier with the hook. It stands for story in a nutshell because a graph actually means paragraph. There you go. The nut graph, it should include the context behind the soft lead. So honestly, think of it as the 5 W's, right? Who, what, when, where, when. So this is the journalistic W's that are basically not introduced in the lead because don't forget, in the lead, we didn't talk about the decree. We didn't talk about the hard current events, all right? It's basically stating an argument or your argument that you will be putting forth in your op-ed. Now, the nut graph, that's where the underlying message and theme of the op-ed is really going to come out, all right? And it's extremely, extremely important in all news articles, especially hard news articles. It has a different type of nut graph. Soft feature articles, say sports or an editor, that is going to tell you the theme of the article, okay? So let me just write this here. This is the underlying message or theme of an article. So let's go over what a nut graph exactly is. First of all, it's a paragraph. That's pretty straightforward, right? So like a nut, it contains the kernel. So these are the essential aspects of your piece, okay? So graph, yes, it stands for paragraph, and it's just really an alternative spelling, okay? So you can either have it as graph with an F or graph with a PH at the end, and it stands for story in a nutshell, all right? Like I said, it's a journalism term, all right? And it tells you the W's. So it follows the lead, and it could either be spelled as L-E-D-E or L-E-A-D, which was how we normally use it in this op-ed, all right? It gives you the underlying idea of a story. It gives you the essential theme, okay? Adds more details, certainly, okay? And the 5 W's not in the lead. Now, this is not always the case. It's not always the case, but it is often followed by a good, flashy question, flashy question. And it could be very explicit. It could literally state a question, or it can be implicit. It may also be implied, okay? So that is a nut graph. Now, a nut graph is different when you're looking at soft news versus hard news, as I touched on earlier. When it comes to a soft news story, the 5 W's, well, they may take place a little further down than in hard news stories. The hard news story, it's like it opens up with the hard news, like exactly what happened. Soft news, it's like, oh, I want to draw my readers in first, okay? So oftentimes a soft news nut graph might even be a little bit more difficult because you have to make the readers actually care about the situation, right? You're not just conveying major information or what just happened. You need to make them care while also telling them what happened. So sometimes they can be pretty difficult and pretty complex. I'm going to give an example of a soft lead, okay, and basically show you the nut graph that comes right afterwards. So, for example, this is written by reporter Julia Malone. High on a mountain overlook, construction crews blast through solid rock on a 20 hours a day rush schedule to build the first 2 miles of an expressway that, for the next few years, will lead only to a turnaround. So note that this is a scene-setting anecdote, right? You're on this mountain overlook. There are these construction crews blasting through solid rock. They're telling about the rush schedule. They're working really hard, like 20 hours a day. That's a lot. That's a lot, okay? Now, here is the nut graph that comes right afterwards. But for promoters in this Appalachian university town, that's of little concern. Dubbed the Smart Road and designed to double as a high technology research site, this federal state project shows how a little pork tucked into a federal transportation bill can buy a whole hog for a community. That is an excellent, excellent nut graph. Okay, so you can tell that there is a narrative component, there is a descriptive narrative component, and there are some feelings and emotions that are involved here, but it's also telling you the 5 W's. So let's go through it. I'm going to read it again, and I want you to think about the what, who, where, why, and when. Okay? But for promoters in this Appalachian university town, that's of little concern. Dubbed the Smart Road and designed to double as a high technology research site, this federal state project shows how a little pork tucked into a federal transportation bill can buy a whole hog for a community.